Codependence Anonymous, Chapter 3, A Suggested Program of Recovery, page 25. Codependence is an elusive and devastating problem that requires simple yet specific solutions. Many of us believe these solutions can be found within the program of Codependence Anonymous. The CODA program consists of the following: the fellowship, CODA meetings, sponsorship, literature, conferences, conventions, service work, the CODA 12 steps, and 12 traditions. The CODA 12 steps have been adapted from the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous for our use, as well as for many of the other 12-step programs. Millions of people worldwide have applied these concepts to their lives. These steps hold the strength and spirit of personal recovery. We become willing to work them to the best of our ability. We're as honest as possible with ourselves, our higher power, and another person. Half-hearted attempts to work the steps often leave us feeling self-defeated. The changes we seek may not last long. If we attempt to complete the steps alone, we may perpetuate isolation, a common codependent behavior. In time, many of us seek the loving help of those who have traveled this path before us, sponsors in CODA who can offer us insight, encouragement, and support. They help us see that these steps cannot be completed quickly or absolutely. They are not quick fixes. The 12 steps steer us from a path of self-defeating behaviors toward healthy and loving relationships with God, ourselves, and others. They offer us growth, a priority for our relationships, and a guide for living healthy and loving lives. Through their simplistic nature, we can discover who we are and how to become involved in healthy, loving relationships. These steps help us see how our past experiences of abuse and neglect have formed and reinforced our codependent behaviors and lifestyles. We learn how to turn over our self-claimed power, addictions, and problems to a loving higher power. We give our lives, will, and healing into the care of that higher power. We become accountable for our codependent behaviors, which reinforce patterns of devastation in our lives. We grow in humility as we learn of our own shortcomings and defects of character and recognize our skills, talents, and successes. From this humble state, we do all within our power to right our wrongs, and we also try to complete the work which helps heal our wounds and perhaps those whom we have hurt. In our step work, we strive on a daily basis to maintain accountability for our own behavior. We learn to strengthen and deepen our relationship with our higher power. We rely more freely upon our higher power for our true value, worth, and well-being. Finally, we realize if we want to keep what we have gained through our step work, we must strive to pass on the experience, strength, and hope of our recovery to those who still suffer from codependence. Our journey through the steps may be the most difficult work we ever attempt, yet the rewards and the healing we receive cannot be measured. In time, the steps become an integral part of our daily lives as we practice these principles in all our affairs. Listed below are the 12 steps, which are the suggested program of Codependence Anonymous for personal recovery from codependence. Number 1, we admitted we were powerless over others, that our lives had become unmanageable. Number 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Number 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood God. Number 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Number 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Number 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Number 7, humbly asked God to remove our shortcomings. Number 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Number 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Number 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Number 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God and as we understood God, praying only for knowledge of God's will for us and the power to carry that out. Number 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to other codependents and to practice these principles in all our affairs. At first glance, some of us see these steps as overwhelming tasks that can never be accomplished. Some of us see them as quick, easy instructions that can be achieved in an afternoon or in a few days. Some of us avoid them entirely until we become overburdened with crises and our codependent behaviors. Ultimately, we must be willing to move forward and embrace these steps as part of our personal recovery if we want our lives to get better. Step 1. We admitted we were powerless over others, that our lives had become unmanageable. On powerlessness, until now, we had applied self-control, obsessiveness, and our own clouded thinking to our problems of living. When our relationships broke down, many of us just tried harder, applying our arsenal of misinformation with a vengeance, our self-will took many forms. We were overbearing, we were people pleasers, we conformed, we rebelled, we blamed, we hurt ourselves, and we hurt others. Some of us had to go to the edge of insanity or death before we were willing to admit our powerlessness. And all the while we were convinced we were doing the right thing. Where was success? On unmanageability. Chances are that by the time we reached coda, our lives were out of control. The coping skill we had relied on for a lifetime were no longer working. We were the victims of a compulsive way of behaving, so subtly powerful and damaging that no ordinary means could break it. Our lives were truly unmanageable. It was at this point that our old ideas began to crumble as we became open to the possibility that there might be another way. Excerpt from Step 1 in the Coda 12 Steps Handbook. All journeys begin with a first step. Our journey of personal recovery in Coda begins with the Coda first step. To understand the growing devastation of our powerlessness and unmanageability, we must explore our past and how we arrived at this point. Maybe we were devastated by a divorce, separation, or a loved one's death. Maybe we tried killing ourselves or slowly bottomed out from drugs or alcohol. Many of us are overwhelmed and weary. Once we make the decision to change, we start our recovery journey with Step 1, the step of admission and acceptance. This step helps us to identify our lifetime of experiences, feelings, and behaviors, to pinpoint how we avoid, control, and manipulate ourselves, other people, and our circumstances. We learn how we've become our own higher power or place others in that role. We begin to see that God has not given us the right to control another person's behavior, but we have been given the responsibility to set limits and boundaries for ourselves and others. To explore how we control and avoid ourselves and others, we search our personal histories. We ask ourselves the following questions to see if they apply to our lives. What neglect and abuse did I experience growing up? Where did I learn to turn my head when I and or other people were being neglected or abused, and why? Who in my childhood displayed these behaviors or instructed me not to tell or share my feelings about it? Where did I learn that avoiding others was safer than being involved? Where did I learn to control others for my sense of well-being? How did I learn that I wasn't good enough or was better than others? When, where, and how did I learn to deny my own thoughts, feelings, and needs for the sake of others or conversely, to demand that the world revolve around me? How did I know never to tell the family secrets, and why? Where did I learn to behave in neglectful and or abusive ways that are intellectually, emotionally, physically, sexually, and or spiritually harmful? Where did I learn to express these behaviors, which are often communicated in the extremes from silence to violence? How did I learn to allow them to be expressed toward me? Where and how did I learn that having a relationship would make me whole? Did I learn these things through others' words or actions? If so, whose? How had I come to survive life through codependent behaviors rather than living life through a sense of freedom? What are my true feelings about all these questions? By answering these questions, we gain an understanding of how our powerlessness developed in our childhood. But knowing this is not enough. We must see the unmanageability of the codependent behaviors we carry into our adult lives. To explore our unmanageable adult codependent behaviors, we find it helpful to review the first chapter and its outline of the denial, loss, low self-esteem, control, and compliance patterns. We specifically list those patterns which represent our adult codependent behaviors. It's important to be honest with ourselves to change our unmanageability. By exploring the powerlessness of our childhood and the unmanageability of our adult lives, we come to understand more about the personal heritage. Our denial of codependence fades, our acceptance increases, and we're better able to see our destructive adult behaviors. It is extremely important to remember that our first step is not to be used to assign blame to others or ourselves. We're not on a witch hunt. By holding on to blame, we react codependently and remain powerless. Rather than blame, we attempt to review our childhood and adult experiences that are the roots of unhealthy behaviors. We acknowledge how powerlessness and unmanageability developed in our childhood and gradually manifested themselves in our adult behavior and relationships. We accept that our lives get crazier the more we try to control and avoid ourselves and others. Rather than blame others or ourselves, we become accountable for our feelings about our childhood and adult experiences, as well as our progressive adult codependent behavior. We find it helpful to list the losses we've experienced in our childhood and adult life. We allow ourselves to grieve these losses, the pain and anger we've held so long. As we release these feelings, we begin to release the energies that drive our codependent behaviors. We see that our codependent behaviors of manipulation, control, and avoidance have only left us in despair. Many of us share our first step with our sponsors and friends in recovery. We share our past experiences, losses, and grief. In doing so, we begin to release the emotional depths of our powerlessness and unmanageability. Once we do, we can begin to accept our past, think more positively, and act in healthier ways with ourselves and others. By understanding and accepting our codependence, powerlessness, and unmanageability of our lives, we open the door to possible solutions. We admit that our best efforts in these areas have failed and that we need greater help than our own limited abilities can provide. From this position of admission and acceptance, we are ready to reach for the help of a power greater than ourselves to restore us to sanity. Step 2. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Came to believe. In the beginning, we came to believe by attending meetings and listening. We heard others as they described a relationship with a higher power. We noticed that those who maintained a regular connection with this power experienced what we sought, recovery. Because we were members of a 12-step program, the form of this power was left to each of us to discover. We became willing to entertain the possibility there was something that could do for us what we could not do for ourselves. Restore us to sanity. With the help of others in the program, we began to look more clearly at our own behavior. We discovered a great truth in step 2, that continuing to act in a self-destructive manner, no matter how well-meaning we believed we were, was insane. And once this behavior became compulsive, any belief we held that we could control it on our own was equally insane. Becoming honest with ourselves was at times painful. The reward was magnificent. As we came to believe and embrace the simple and profound truth offered in this step, the seed of humility produced our admission of powerlessness in step 1 was nurtured. We experienced a sense of freedom and hope by our willingness to have a true higher power. At this point, our faith emerged. Excerpt from step 2 in the Coda 12-step handbook. In step 1, we recognized our failure in our own attempts to play God. We also allow others to be our God. We recognize that we must seek help beyond ourselves and those to whom we given authority. In doing so, we become ready to develop a belief in a power greater than ourselves, a power that can restore us to sanity and health. In step 2, we begin establishing or strengthening this belief. For those of us who do not know a higher power, as we embark on a new and wondrous relationship, for those of us who have a relationship with a higher power, this step can help us strengthen its weaker areas. Through our work in the first step, we learn that as children, we may have prayed often for God's help, but the neglect and or abuse continued. The authority figures in our lives were often unavailable and absorbed in their own addictions and codependence. As adults, we try to leave those circumstances behind, only to find ourselves in adult relationships where similar or extreme opposite behaviors occur. We keep praying to God, but nothing changes until we turn away from our addictions and from the people with whom we're obsessed. We may sometimes continue to look to others for solutions, peace, hope, and our sense of identity and worth. We begin to feel more worthless because our humanness won't allow us to be our own higher power, or we give that power to others. We are left with few choices. Only one offers us the freedom, strength, and serenity we so desperately need. Some of us come to Coda already believing in a loving God. We may feel God's loving presence through hardship or believe that God abandons us in time of need. Many times, shame causes us to believe we're not good enough to warrant God's love, goodness, or grace. Some of us have little or no concept of a higher power, or we may have forgotten or abandoned our learned concept of God. A review of Chapter 1 and 2 can help us clarify our concept of a higher power. In our childhood, our higher power may have had personality traits similar to authority figures. At times, God may still resemble a punishing or shaming person, like a tyrannical spiritual leader, family member, or friend. We find it helpful to list the personality characteristics and traits of a higher power with whom we do have or would like to have a relationship. This can help us determine if we have transferred personality traits and characteristics from our former or present abusers to our higher power. To better understand these concepts, we talk with others in Coda and learn from their experiences. And some people choose nature, the universe, or their home groups of Codependence Anonymous as their higher power. Others choose renew or strengthen a belief in a higher power of religious convictions. We learn how they struggle just like us and how they experience many miracles in their lives and relationships with God and others, often in spite of their doubts and fears. We learn of their spiritual discoveries and how God works in their lives, even when they ignore God's presence. We learn how their lives are restored through faith and even divine intervention, sometimes in the face of life-threatening circumstances. For some people, placing faith and belief in a higher power may be difficult because it means letting go of illusionary safeguards. It means believing or being willing to believe that a power greater than ourselves can do for us what we're unable to do for ourselves. Remember, we're being asked in step 2 only to believe or be willing to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. We're not required to believe in another person's personal God, religion, or spiritual concept. Our higher power must feel right and safe for us. Our higher power must be one of our own choosing and concept. As we begin placing our faith in this renewed or newly established relationship, we begin to feel relief and a new sense of hope. We no longer need to control or avoid ourselves or others. We begin placing this relationship first to gain the strength and peace necessary to maintain recovery and live life rather than survive life. In step 2, we experience a newfound faith and responsibility. Our higher power does not accomplish our recovery work for us. We must do our share. Every day, we must attempt to renew and strengthen our relationship with our higher power and share our newly fortified experience, strength, and hope with other codependents. With the help of a loving higher power, we are now ready to begin step 3.